Dr. Kim Jones had always prided herself on being rational. 23 years of medical practice had shown her every conceivable horror the human body could endure, yet she'd never believed in anything that couldn't be explained by science. That changed during her first week at St. Bartholomew's Hospital. The 120-year-old building creaked and groaned like arthritic bones, its Victorian architecture casting long shadows even in daylight. The hospital had been shuttered for 15 years before reopening as a research facility, and Kim was part of the skeleton crew conducting late-night autopsies for the coroner's office. "You'll get used to it," said Marcus, the security guard, as he escorted her through the basement corridors on her first night. His flashlight beam danced across peeling paint and rusted pipes. "Buildings got character, you know. Sometimes the elevator moves on its own, doors slam shut. Old places do that." Kim nodded politely, though she suspected the building's character was simply faulty wiring and settling foundations. The morgue itself was surprisingly modern, gleaming steel tables, state-of-the-art refrigeration units, and bright fluorescent lighting that banished the shadows lurking in the corridors outside. Her first few nights passed without incident. She worked alone, as she preferred, methodically examining the bodies brought in from across the county. The silence was broken only by the hum of refrigeration units and the occasional groan of old pipes. It was on her fourth night that she first heard the footsteps. They came from directly above, slow, deliberate steps pacing back and forth across the ceiling. Kim paused in her examination of a heart attack victim and listened. The morgue was located in the subbasement. Above it should be the abandoned patient ward that hadn't been used since the hospital's closure. She returned to her work, but the footsteps continued. Back and forth, with an uneven gait as if someone were dragging one leg. After an hour, they stopped. "Marcus?" She called into her radio. "Yeah, Doc? Are there supposed to be people on the second floor tonight?" A pause. "Second floor's been sealed off since we reopened." "Why?" "I thought I heard something. Probably just the building settling." "Like I said, Doc. Character." But Kim knew the difference between settling and footsteps, and those had definitely been footsteps. The next night, they came again. Same pattern, uneven pacing directly overhead, lasting exactly 1 hour before stopping abruptly. This time, Kim was ready. She'd researched the hospital's history and discovered that the second floor had once housed the terminal ward, where patients with incurable diseases spent their final days. During her break, she convinced Marcus to take her upstairs. "I really shouldn't," he protested, but Kim's medical credentials and natural authority won out. The second floor was a time capsule from hell. Dust-covered wheelchairs sat in corners like metal skeletons. Patient rooms stretched down both sides of a central corridor, their doors hanging open to reveal stripped beds and medical equipment that belonged in a museum. The air smelled of disinfectant and decay. "Room 237, Marcus said, stopping in front of one door. "That's where it happened." "Where what happened?" "Patient named William Thorne. Been here 3 months with bone cancer, real bad case. Story goes he kept trying to get up, walk around despite being paralyzed from the waist down. One night in 1987, orderly found him dead, not in his bed, but standing in the middle of the room. Doctors said it was impossible, but there he was." Kim felt a chill despite herself. "Standing?" "That's what they said. Autopsy showed his spine was completely severed. Shouldn't have been able to move, let alone stand. But there he was, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling like he'd seen something up there." They stood in the doorway of room 237. Kim could see it clearly, a cramped space with a single window overlooking the hospital's courtyard. The bed frame remained, its mattress long since removed. "The footsteps I've been hearing," Kim said slowly. "They have an uneven gait. Like someone dragging a leg." Marcus shrugged. "Buildings got character." But that night, when the footsteps started again, Kim couldn't concentrate. She found herself staring at the ceiling, tracking the sound as it moved back and forth. Always the same pattern. Always exactly 1 hour. On the 6th night, the footsteps stopped directly above her workstation. Kim stood perfectly still, holding her breath. Above her, something was happening. She could hear a scraping sound, as if furniture were being moved. Then, silence. She waited 5 minutes before returning to her work, but her hands shook as she made her incisions. The silence felt heavier than the footsteps had. The seventh night changed everything. Kim was examining a young woman who'd died in a car accident when she heard them again, but this time, they weren't coming from above. They were coming from the corridor outside the morgue. She froze, scalpel in hand, and listened. Slow, uneven steps echoing off the tile floor. Coming closer. The morgue door was closed, but not locked. Kim watched the handle, her heart hammering against her ribs. The footsteps stopped right outside. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then the handle turned. The door swung open slowly, revealing the empty corridor beyond. But Kim could hear breathing, labored, wet breathing like someone with fluid in their lungs. "Hello?" she called, her voice barely above a whisper. The breathing stopped. Kim grabbed her flashlight and stepped into the corridor. It was empty, but the temperature had dropped noticeably. Her breath misted in the suddenly frigid air. "Marcus, I need you in the basement." "Now?" "On my way, Doc." She returned to the morgue but left the door open. 5 minutes later, Marcus arrived, slightly out of breath. "What's the problem?" "Someone was here. I heard footsteps, breathing. The door opened by itself." Marcus examined the door mechanism. "These old doors don't latch properly sometimes. Could have been a draft." "What about the footsteps? The breathing?" "Building's got." "Don't say character," Kim snapped. "Something is wrong here." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Look, Doc, I've worked here 2 years. Yeah, weird stuff happens. Doors open and close, lights flicker, sometimes you hear things. But nothing's ever hurt anybody. Whatever it is, it just seems sad." "Sad?" "Like it's looking for something. Or someone." That night, Kim couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about William Thorne, the paralyzed patient who died standing up, staring at the ceiling. What had he seen up there? What was he looking for? On her 8th night, she brought a recorder. The footsteps came as usual, but this time Kim was ready. She positioned the device on her workstation and hit record as the sounds began overhead. For an hour, she documented the pattern: 13 steps forward, pause, 13 steps back. Always 13. When she played back the recording the next morning, she heard something that made her blood freeze. Underneath the footsteps, barely audible, was a voice. "Kim. Kim. Where are you, Kim?" Her own name, spoken in a whisper that sounded like wind through dead leaves. She played it again and again, but there was no mistake. Something was calling her name. That day, she didn't go home. Instead, she went to the hospital's records room and searched through archived patient files from 1987. She found William Thorne's file buried in a box marked "Deceased, Terminal Ward." The photograph showed a man in his 40s, gaunt from illness but with intelligent eyes. According to his chart, he'd been a widower with no children, admitted with advanced bone cancer that had metastasized to his spine. His emergency contact was listed as Kim Thorne, niece with a phone number that was no longer in service. Kim stared at the file, her hands trembling. William Thorne had been looking for his niece Kim when he died. A niece who apparently had never come to visit. She cross-referenced the name with hospital employment records and found her, Kim Thorne, registered nurse, employed at St. Bartholomew's from 1985 to 1988. The photograph in the personnel file showed a young woman who looked remarkably like Kim herself, the same dark hair, the same serious expression. More digging revealed the truth. Kim Thorne had been scheduled to work the night shift on March 15, 1987, the night her uncle William died. But she'd called in sick, leaving William to die alone, still calling for his niece who never came. The nurse had quit 3 days later and moved across the country, apparently unable to cope with the guilt. On her 9th night, Kim entered the morgue with a heavy heart. She understood now why the footsteps lasted exactly 1 hour. William Thorne had spent his final hour pacing his room, looking for Kim, before collapsing and dying on his feet. The footsteps came as usual, but this time Kim called out, "William? William Thorne?" The footsteps stopped immediately. I know you're looking for Kim. Your niece Kim. Silence. Then, faintly, that whispered voice, Kim? She's not here anymore, William. She moved away. But I'm Kim too. Kim Jones. The temperature in the room plummeted. Kim's breath came in visible puffs as she continued, she was sorry, William. I know she was sorry she couldn't be there. From the corridor came the sound of footsteps, but these were different, no longer uneven, but steady and purposeful. They approached the morgue door. The handle turned, and the door swung open to reveal a figure that Kim could see but couldn't quite focus on, as if it were made of smoke and shadow. It was tall, gaunt, wearing a hospital gown that hung loosely on its emaciated frame. Kim, it whispered, and Kim felt a profound sadness wash over her, not her own sadness, but his. 36 years of waiting, of pacing, of calling out for someone who would never come. I'm here, she said softly. I'm here now. The figure took a step forward, then another. As it moved into the light, Kim could see its face clearly, William Thorne, exactly as he'd appeared in his hospital photograph, but translucent and shimmering like heat mirages. I waited, he said, his voice like wind through empty rooms. I waited so long. I know. I'm sorry you had to wait alone. William smiled then, and the sadness in the room began to lift. You came, he said. Finally, you came. He took another step forward, reaching out with one transparent hand. Kim didn't flinch as those ghostly fingers touched her cheek, they felt like cool water, like morning mist. Thank you, he whispered. And then he was gone. No dramatic disappearance, no swirling mist or supernatural fanfare. He simply wasn't there anymore, leaving behind only the faint scent of hospital disinfectant and something else, something like peace. The morgue felt different after that. Warmer. The oppressive weight that Kim hadn't even realized she'd been carrying seemed to lift from her shoulders. She worked in silence for the rest of the night, and when her shift ended, she felt oddly satisfied. She'd helped someone, in a way she'd never expected. But as she gathered her things to leave, she noticed something on her workstation that hadn't been there before, a small, faded photograph of a young woman in a nurse's uniform. Kim Thorne, circa 1987, smiling at the camera. On the back, in faded ink, someone had written, "Thank you for coming. Uncle William." Kim Jones stared at the photograph for a long time, then carefully tucked it into her lab coat pocket. Some mysteries, she realized, were worth believing in. She never heard the footsteps again, but sometimes, on particularly quiet nights, she thought she could feel a presence in the morgue, not malevolent or sad, but watchful. Grateful. It wasn't until 3 months later, when she was cleaning out her desk, that Kim made the discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the back of the bottom drawer was an old employee badge, yellowed with age. The name on it read Dr. Kim Jones, but the photograph showed the face of the young nurse from the 1987 personnel file, the face of Kim Thorne. Below the photo, in the same faded handwriting as the note on the photograph, were the words, "Welcome home." Kim stared at the badge, her rational mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The badge was older than she was, dated 15 years before her birth, yet it bore her name and the face of a woman who'd died decades ago. As understanding dawned, Kim felt the world tilt around her. She wasn't Kim Jones, the rational doctor who'd come to work at St. Bartholomew's Hospital. She was Kim Thorne, the nurse who'd failed to come to her uncle's bedside, who'd been running from her guilt for 36 years across lifetimes, across existence itself. She'd been brought back to finish what she'd started, to be there for William in his final moments, to ease his passage from this world to whatever lay beyond. The ghost in the morgue hadn't been William Thorne. It had been her. Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like and subscribe button, and then share it with your friends. Your support helps us grow and create even more awesome content. We appreciate you being part of the journey.